few years ago, and Dr. Taylor Chesney is giving the webinar today, hung out with us over there at the Stanford rooms. A few years ago, after she came back to New York, she became the director of our center over there. Taylor has been the director of the Feeling Good Institute in New York Center, and she teaches and trains in New York and online. And Annie has been a lovely addition to our center fairly recently. It's lovely to have both of you here today, and I will turn to you to start the webinar.
Thanks, Maor, for that introduction. I'm Taylor Chesney. I'm the director of the Feeling Good Institute in New York City, as Maor had said. I'm also an assistant clinical professor at Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, where I teach residents about cognitive behavioral therapy. I specialize in treating children and adolescents, and I absolutely love working with this population. I'm a mother of 3 young children, so today I hope to talk about and combine what I know clinically also with what I know as a parent. Thanks for joining us, and now I'll let Annie introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Annie Mykyta. As Mayor said, I am pretty new to Feeling Good Institute in New York City and team, but not new to this topic. So I have good deal of experience in helping parents connect with their kids, because besides my work at Feeling Good Institute, I'm also a psychologist for an elementary school in New York City. And so I spend a large portion of my day on this topic, and I'm super passionate about it. I'm also a relatively new mom myself. I have a 15-month-old, so my empathy for parents continues to grow every day as I embark on toddler years. And so yeah, I'm really excited to be here and to hopefully contribute to this webinar. Oh, a couple of quick sort of procedural things. You'll notice at the bottom that there are some options for chat and Q&A. And we ask that if you have a specific question that you'd like to ask during the webinar, you use that Q&A box, and I will do my best to be fielding questions as we proceed.
So Taylor's asked that I talk about this part. Just talking a little bit about what is Feeling Good Institute in a few more words, more specifically. What we are is a treatment and training or a chain or a network of treatment and training centers with the goal of providing treatment and training and certification in the most effective treatment that we're aware of in CBT, called Team CBT. And we kind of have 2 arms. One is more of a therapy arm, making this therapy accessible to patients through intensive therapy. What we do is one-on-one intensive therapy at our centers in New York and in Mountain View in California, where people, it's pretty awesome, people fly in from different places, or local people that want to get better faster doing this one-on-one treatment. We also provide online therapy and in multiple states and in Canada. The other part of it is, of course, the training and certification. So we put a lot of effort into creating teaching materials. And if you're interested in learning more about this, there's just on our website, feelinggoodinstitute.com/training, you'll find different options. More specifically, for those of you interested in this kind of work with children and adolescents, then there are 2 upcoming options. Taylor gives a comprehensive Team CBT training usually once a year, and the next one is coming up this fall. And that's if you want to kind of learn this kind of approach to therapy in a more cohesive, comprehensive way. And if you're more of a case-based learner, or you want to get a place to get case consultation, there's an option there for you as well. Because while the first course is going to be a 3-month weekly course, there's also a case consultation that Taylor runs once per month, all online, of course, same as that other course, in a kind of very intimate format. It's not like the format that we have today. So you can look at that information too on our website. We'll also send you an email about it after the recording.
Thanks, Noah. Now I'll jump into things just to kind of orient you to our time today and what I'll be covering. Not doing it in time since we're all different time zones, and this will also be recorded and sent out after so people can view it. So the first 10 or so minutes, kind of our intro and set up to the talk. I'll spend about 15 minutes teaching the 5 secrets of effective communication for children. I'm going to pause and answer some questions. So Annie will field most of those questions, but if there's a few questions that we feel the whole group will benefit from, or several people want to hear me talk more about that, I'll be happy to pause then. I want to make sure this feels interactive and engaging, even though I'm not actually getting to interact with you directly on the computer. Annie will then give us some great examples of using the 5 secrets of effective communication with parents that she's worked with. I'll then give you some quick tips and tricks to using these tools more effectively, and then we'll end with some more questions. So I hope you enjoy our webinar today, and again, thank you for joining us. Okay, we're going to start with a poll. And you want to introduce the poll?
So our first question is, do you, if you have your own children or your patients who have children, ever struggle to empathize with children? So we'll take a few minutes to give people a chance to answer that. All right, so the results are in, and yes, it is really hard to empathize with children at times. Of course, parenting is a tough gig, and I think children push our buttons all the time because that's their job. And so I think it's important to keep that in mind too when we're working with parents, how difficult a job it is and how everyone is trying their best. But at times it can be extremely difficult to empathize with our children.
All right, so I want to just quickly set some realistic expectations for what I'm covering today, so you know what to expect. For those that are familiar with TEAM, I'm not going to be spending any time on agenda setting, but I do want to say a quick note on that it's super important to do this, right? We're making the assumption here that we're talking to parents that do want to improve their relationship with their children, want to learn some new tips and tricks and tools to improve their relationship and how they interact with the children. So we're not getting into that talk of like blaming and who should take responsibility. We're purely going to be talking about those tools and tricks that you can use with parents. And my full disclosure is that I use these tools and tricks with my children. They work a lot of the time, not all the time. But what I do feel best about is my ability to feel like I'm working with my children, not against them, and really trying to understand their experience and help them better develop their emotional intelligence. So really a way to bring out the best in us as parents and children, a way to kind of love and nurture that relationship. And I want to start with a quote from my favorite parenting book is, I'm sure a lot of you know it, How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and Listen So Kids Will Talk. There's a direct connection between how kids feel and how they behave. When kids feel right, they'll behave. And this is a lot of the time, right? This isn't a perfect tool, and we all want our kids to behave better, right? So how do we help them feel right? By accepting their feelings. So I'm going to be sharing with you today how to do that. And I think it's incredibly challenging for us as parents to, to accept how children are feeling. right? Kids are always hearing, stop feeling that way, or stop acting out, or you're not hungry, or that you shouldn't be so upset about that, right? They're always being told how they should feel, and that's really hard. One of the criticisms that I sometimes get from people that I'm teaching on this topic is, but if I'm accepting their feelings, doesn't that make me permissive? Doesn't that make me kind of like a mushy-gushy parent that can't set limits? And that's not true at all. That's what I feel most passionate about helping parents realize, that you can connect emotionally with your children, accept their experience while setting a limit. So all feelings can be accepted, but certain actions must be limited. And I find David Burns' 5 Secrets of Effective Communication to be an awesome way of thinking about this process. So the first tool that I want to teach is the disarming technique. And in the disarming technique, we want to try to find some truth in what your child is saying by agreeing with them. And a lot of times with children, we want to do this using fantasy language to try to see the world through their eyes, right? So really trying to get at what they're seeing. So you're right, I wish we could eat ice cream all the time and stay healthy and strong, right? There's definitely truth to that. I think we all wish we could do that too, right? So rather than just saying, no, you can't eat that ice cream, or you can't have ice cream for breakfast, getting a little playful with them and saying, I wish, or I would love if we could, and it makes total sense that you really want that. Who here likes to be told what to do? I know I don't. And when people try to tell me what I should do, the stubborn side of me comes out. I'm sure we can all relate to this. And the same is true of children, right? The law of opposites is the more we reject what kids say, the more they believe it. So a kid says, I need it now. And you're like, no, you don't, right? I think we all kind of get into that power struggle. Favorite story of mine that kind of comes to mind that happened with my daughter several months ago. We were probably all of 8 o'clock in the morning, and we were at 7-Eleven. I was getting my large coffee, and we passed this huge pink sprinkled donut. My daughter was like, Mommy, look, a donut. And in my mind, I was thinking, she wants that donut, and I just have to tell her, no, you can't have that donut for breakfast. And so I went against my instinct, and instead of just saying no, I was like, look, that donut looks so awesome. I wish we could eat it. Yum, yum, yum. And we kind of laughed about it, and we moved on. And I've been in that situation before where I tried to be that like strong, assertive parent and be like, no, you can't have it. And it really just led to a temper tantrum, right? So by really kind of getting in there with her and accepting and kind of using fantasy language with her, it totally diffused the situation. The next of the 5 secrets is empathy. And so there's 2 different types of empathy that we want to use. The first is thought empathy, where we paraphrase what your child is saying using their own words. So something like, it sounds like you didn't get what you want, or you're saying your brother is being really mean to you. I know I hear a lot of times parents saying, and I've fallen into this trap too, is I understand what you're feeling, or I hear what you're saying. But that doesn't show them, right? Show them that you hear it by repeating it back. And that's how kids really feel like you're getting it. And then that's also a time where they can correct you, like, no, Mom, I didn't say that, right? And kind of being really open with that type of communication. The next type is feeling empathy. So taking a guess at how your child is feeling and helping them name their emotions. So sometimes children feel really big emotions. They get really angry or upset, and they don't know what's going on for them. So saying something like, wow, you must be feeling really sad or really upset right now, or really frustrated. And that makes a lot of sense. So really kind of sitting with those feelings, not trying to correct them, but really just labeling them kind of conveys to kids that it's okay to feel really big emotions. And that's okay, right? We're not trying to get them to calm down or like feel better, but really letting them know what's going on for them. And I always like to encourage parents to mimic the intensity of their child's emotions, right? So if someone's feeling really sad or upset, or more so really angry, if you're just kind of sitting there really calm and collected, it doesn't really show them that you're getting, right? So if a kid is like yelling and screaming and holding their fist or something like that, it's okay to kind of mimic that, obviously not in an aggressive way to them, but really to convey that you get it. Because we want kids not to hide from their feelings, but to know that it's okay to feel that way. and sit with it and deal with those emotions. This isn't all just about what's going on for the child, right? We also want to teach children that we have feelings too, and that things are hard for us and going on for us. And I think this is a really tricky one, right? I know a lot of times when I teach this, and you might be thinking this too, you don't want to burden children with your emotions, right? If I share how I'm feeling, won't that make them uncomfortable? And all of these tools and tricks can be done kind of in a hokey, ineffective way, or can be done in a really genuine way. And if we use I feel statements to express our own feelings without blaming or without manipulating, just kind of share what's going on for us, then it can be really effective. So I'm feeling a little frustrated right now, or I'm feeling a little tired or sad. And I also really like to encourage parents to use I feel statements when things are going well, right? This isn't all like how tricks to help get your children to behave better when they're really sad, but also how to connect with your children. And part of that is recognizing the positive. So I know I encourage parents, and I do this with my children, I'm really excited to be here together, right? Sometimes it feels a little cheesy. I think sometimes being an emotionally attuned parent is a little bit cheesy. So for example, my two kids playing calmly in the corner, right? I just want to leave them be, maybe call a friend or get some coffee, but really that's a perfect time to kind of share how you're feeling in a positive way. I'm feeling so excited to see you guys sharing and to be playing so nicely together. So I think I feel is one of my favorites and can be super effective.
Taylor, sorry, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure, please.
Feedback that it's a bit loud when you shuffle the papers, so if you could try to keep those away from.
Sure. I didn't even realize that was there. Thank you so much. Last bit on I feel statements was a great bit of advice from Jacob Towery, one of my awesome child and adolescent psychiatry mentors at Stanford, that he also likes to use I feel statements to kind of teach why you're doing something or thinking something. And an example he gave me is, as parents, a lot of times when kids are disrespectful, we like to say something like, it's so disrespectful to say so-and-so. So the example he gave was, it's so disrespectful to say you don't like having me as your dad. And so instead of kind of like blaming or being too assertive, another way of using an I feel statement is, when you tell me you don't like having me as your dad, I feel pretty hurt. Next, moving on to stroking. So in stroking, we want to try to find something genuinely nice to say to your child and positively reinforce them. Wondering, anyone here thinking that when they're really angry, they also like to be really positive and effusatory to their children and say really nice things. I know when I'm angry at someone, it's really hard to be nice, but it really does a lot to break the tension and also really build that relationship and help you feel more connected to your children. So simple things like, I love you, you're so special to me, or I had so much fun with you today, or I feel really excited when I see you sharing with your sibling. The last of David's 5 secrets, and then I'll add one extra one at the end, is inquiry. So asking open-ended questions to show that you want to know more about how they're feeling. And I like to be very specific about what we're inquiring about is sort of like what is going on for them cognitively or what emotions they're feeling. And I see the biggest trap we all fall into here is problem solving. Right? So we want to avoid problem solving, but really sit with those feelings and emotions. So something like, tell me more about, or what was going on for you when Sally was really mean to you at school, right? I think as parents, we want to make our kids feel better and solve their problems a lot of the times. And that's helpful in certain situations, but sort of neglects the importance of tolerating emotions and building their emotional intelligence. I know I often fall into this trap. I'm a very practical person and a problem solver. So I sort of developed this phrase that you can catch your error and revise. So it's okay to catch you falling into problem solving with your child, but then take a step back and revise. After you've sort of thought through a practical solution, check back in with them emotionally. What were they feeling emotionally when that was going on? Trying to get to the next slide. There we go. The last is humor. Having some fun with your children, helping your patients' parents get really silly. There's nothing better than some humor to diffuse a really toxic or difficult or stale environment, right? So in the heat of the battle, sometimes it's great to just pause and take a break, right? Nothing effective is happening, take a pause, right? Sometimes that might look like putting some music on, having a dance party, or I know a lot of parents rush out in the morning, right? And need their children to get dressed really quickly. There's often a lot of battles around getting dressed. So instead of continuing with, get dressed quickly, I'm gonna be late, taking a step back and saying like, I'm gonna put your shoes on my head, or something just kind of silly that helps you relate to your children in that way. So I'm gonna pause now for a few questions. Annie, I wonder if there's any questions that people want to hear answers to.
Yeah, so I saved two. How do you teach parents to do the 5 secrets sincerely, so it's not sort of like cliche language or feel sort of, I don't know, fake?
Yeah, it's an awesome question. You know, I initially said we're kind of skipping over the agenda setting part of this. So, right, so we're sort of assuming that it is a population of parents that do want to do it. But some things that I have found to be effective in helping parents is that relationship that you develop with parents. So I think if you can teach it in a way where you feel human too, and you feel like, hey, I've made some of these mistakes too. I use a lot of self-disclosure with parents, trying to think of it as a way in which it's helpful, right? Like I'm not just trying to share my sob stories as a parent with them, but ways that I can let them see, like I know it's hard and I can get it. And a lot of role plays. So I have parent sessions where we'll practice this lots of different times, and I'll encourage parents to get really specific. So if parents are like, but how do I do this? I say, instead of talking in generalities, why don't you write down a specific situation, what you did, and then how you responded, and we kind of work through it and practice it. And something I do cover in my 12-week course that relates to this is one of David Burns' tools, the relationship journal, is a really awesome way to help parents practice this. And I kind of break that down of how you can do that.
Great, thanks, Taylor. And another one that I get a lot from parents also, I've had this question asked of me. Would I feel statements cause the child to feel guilty in any way? Ways to avoid that. So making sure you're trying to avoid like making the child feel responsible for the parent's feelings.
Yeah, I mean, any of these 5 secrets can be done really hoaxy and with malicious intent, right? To make a kid feel guilty, parents can feel angry, and those are really valid concerns. But when done in a genuine way to kind of share what you're feeling, I find that it usually leads to closeness and connection. And it takes practice, right? Like one of the tips and tricks I'll talk about later is also taking a break as a parent. If you feel like you're going to go in there with an I feel statement that's going to lead the child to feel guilty, that's an awesome time to take a break and a timeout.
Great. Do we have time for one more? Do you want to hold it for then?
Yeah, let's take one more.
Okay, this one, and I don't know that we mentioned that we're sort of focusing a little bit more on the 10 and under population today, but this one's asking a bit more about teens. So any suggestions or strategies on working with teens who don't always want to connect with their parents?
Yes, I think I probably skipped over that in my kind of orienting paragraph, but we were today focusing on the 10 and under population. And I try to do small amounts of things really well than trying to cover a whole gamut, right? Because those 10 and under are definitely much less emotionally mature. And I think it's a whole other set of tools and tricks to work with that population. I feel a bit bad to kind of project that question, but I think kind of not do it justice. So in my 12-week course, I will be covering that, and hopefully I'll be able to offer a free webinar if people are interested on using these tools and tricks with older adolescents. Shall we move on to the poll? Cool.
All right, our next poll is, sorry if I can move this for a second. So when you or your patients yell at children, is it effective in getting your desired result? Because we have all yelled at All right. So most people saying, not really, right? Sometimes perhaps a strong tone can help. But usually sort of going back to what Taylor's talking about in the law of opposites, when kids are yelled at, told no, you often find yourself in a power struggle. This happened to me about an hour ago when I was trying to give my daughter breakfast and she dangled food over the table to the dog. And I said no, because I was really frustrated that she wasn't eating. And she looked right at me and threw the blueberries at the dog. So obviously that is a toddler, but I think we can all relate to having been in some similar types of experiences. So now we are going to talk more examples. Give me 1 second because I'm having a hard time seeing with my poll in my way. Beep. Alrighty, so now I can see better. So these are all examples that are sort of my most common examples from working in the schools. I get these all the time from parents, and so helping them talk through a better way to approach the situation is a large part of my time. And a couple of things I want you to notice first, that I wrote bad communication on the left and better communication on the right. It is not good or perfect or the best. I think as with anything, a lot of this is trial and error, and there will never be a perfect way to say something to get your desired result. But the right column sort of represents a better approach or something that I suggest parents try next time. And as I go through these examples, I want you to sort of think through perhaps what mistakes parents made in their first attempt, and how you might have coached them to correct that mistake. I know Taylor has touched on a few of them already, and I'll try to sort of point them out as we go through too. So first example is a child comes home from school complaining that her teacher hates her. Ugh, my teacher hates me. She thinks I am the worst student. And it's kind of a ridiculous thing to say, right? Like the parent knows the teacher doesn't actually hate her child, or probably trusts that the teacher doesn't hate her child. So she sort of laughs, says, your teacher doesn't hate you. Stop being so dramatic. And so one mistake this parent may have made, if you hadn't guessed it already, is she was pretty dismissive, right? She sort of invalidated her kid's feelings and said, like, no, you're wrong. Your teacher doesn't hate you. And while the parent is probably right, I hope that the teacher doesn't actually hate the child. It doesn't really help the child to feel any better or to sort of move on. So an alternate way to approach this could have been, it sounds like something happened with your teacher today to make you feel pretty mad, right? Oh, and if you notice, sorry to pause for a second, the parentheses after some of these sentences are reflecting which strategy of the 5 secrets is being used. So here we have some thought empathy and feeling empathy, and then an inquiry, tell me more. She yelled at me for not listening. Makes sense that you're really upset, right? Disarming technique. I totally understand why you're upset if someone yelled at you. Yes, and I wonder if you maybe felt a little embarrassed too because that happened, right? So she was sort of called out for doing the wrong thing. Yes, well, tell me more about the situation. So also notice that the parent in the better communication is not rushing into problem solve, which I know Taylor talked about as a pretty common mistake, and I see that all the time with parents, is they sort of want to know the facts, what exactly happened, and how do we fix this immediately, right? Because they're busy and they don't want to see their kids struggle. And so I think coaching parents to sort of sit with the emotions a little bit longer can really go a long way in de-escalating and avoiding some of that power struggle. Our next example. Child comes home from school upset about her friend excluding her and giving her the silent treatment. I should also mention that I work in an all-girls elementary school, so I also spend a good deal of my day dealing with some relational aggression issues such as these. So Susan wouldn't sit with me at lunch today and refused to talk to me for the rest of the day. And now this parent, perhaps thinking that she was doing the right thing and taking her child's side, said, oh, she's just jealous, ignore her. But she didn't really take her child's side because her child wants to be friends with that person, right? And so now not only does she sort of dismiss how her child is feeling, but she also sort of threw her friend under the bus, which could exacerbate the situation. So another approach to this could have been, oh dear, that sounds upsetting. I'm so sad that happened, right? And I feel statement. Tell me more about how you're feeling. And hopefully the child would feel really understood and heard and would say something like, I feel really hurt and angry. And then the parent could say something like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know how much you value your friendship with her, and how good a friend you are to her. So that's sort of a nice compliment for the child, right? Stroking example. And it makes me really sad to see you so hurt. Tell me more about what it was like for you when she did that. So again, this could be really easy for a parent to try to jump in and problem solve, either to sort of tell her what she did before, like, well, just don't be friends with her, or to sort of look for ways to help the two come back together as friends. But I think in the long run, what we have found is that you're more likely to have success in connecting with your child if you don't rush into that. So our next one is a child refuses to get ready for school. Oh man, New York City families are very, very busy, as probably most places in the country and world, but I hear this a lot from kids about how rushed they feel. Ugh, stop rushing me, I'm not done with my game. And parents, understandably stressed and frustrated with not getting out the door on time. If you're not dressed and out the door in 10 minutes, you're losing your iPad for the rest of the week. Now, I think something that we'll talk about in a bit too is sort of the idea that it's best to avoid threats that you're not going to make good on, right? If you're not going to take away that iPad, don't say it. But also, like, that's a fairly extreme consequence for the behavior. And so trying to help the parent sort of take some time and acknowledge that and think through some alternate ways to respond that maybe would help get them out the door, or at the very least sort of help de-escalate the situation. So the first step would be to really acknowledge, you're right, I am rushing you, right? And I imagine that feels pretty frustrating. Am I right? Yes, says the child, I never get time to just play. It really does feel like we don't have much free time, doesn't it? I totally agree with you, and I wish we had more time to just play. It's frustrating to me too. Now, you might be wondering in this situation if this child is going to get on that bus, because if you stop to take the time to acknowledge feelings, takes time, right? And so it's very possible that that day you're sort of going to sacrifice the bus and take the time and invest, if you will, in the relationship to sort of validate how your child is feeling, with the hope that it will pay off in the end and you will have a smoother morning the next morning. I would also say that it's very likely that, you know, once the child is calm and you have more time, that you might eventually get to problem solving, right? You might think through your morning routine and how you can make things a little bit more efficient, or at least a bit calmer, and ways to sort of schedule in some free time so the child doesn't feel so rushed. And homework, the ever stressor. I should also mention that I deal with a lot of anxious and perfectionistic kiddos, so I hear a lot about homework meltdowns from parents. I can't do it, it's too hard. And it is so hard to sit and watch your child struggle. So parents very often rush in to help and save the day, right? Here, let me help you. And now we know that would be sort of the quickest fix in that particular situation, perhaps, but obviously in the long term, that is not going to help your child be successful. So a better approach might be to acknowledge, you're right, it is really hard, and I know how frustrating that can be. I love how much you care about your work, and I can see how hard you're trying. But I feel concerned when I hear things like, I can't, right? That sort of makes me wonder. Can you tell me more about what you're thinking and feeling? So making sure that the child is in a calm enough place that they can actually proceed with homework, I think, is sort of the first step, because without that connection and validation, you're never going to get to the math homework, right? And so sort of, again, teaching parents that it is worth the investment on the front end to take the time to sit with the feelings and to really let your child feel heard before proceeding to anything else. And our last example, perhaps for a slightly older child approaching middle school, parents don't let her go on a sleepover on a school night. And she says, it's not fair. Everyone else is allowed to go but me. I hate you. And that I hate you is a real dagger to the heart for most humans. And so understandably, parents are feeling a little upset and hurt probably. You're being a total brat, go to your room. Now, accurate that this child perhaps is being a bit bratty, yeah, but is that going to result in a pleasant evening? Probably not. So a better approach may have been, you're right, you're absolutely right. It's not fair that many of your other friends can go and you can't. I understand why you would feel angry with us for that. And I imagine you might even be feeling a little bit worried about missing out on this. Am I right? So I want to point two things out about this last one that you might be wondering, that perhaps it's a fairly psychologically minded parent who can imagine that their kid would be also worried about missing out. But every once in a while, you do get a parent who sort of gets it, especially when kids are sort of in that tween stage. And another thing I was going to point out that I think I failed to point out in an earlier slide, but Taylor talked about sort of the importance of guessing or labeling how your child is feeling. But there is a bit of a risk in guessing wrong, right? Nobody wants to be told how they're feeling. And if you're off base, that can sort of be annoying. So an easy way around this that I sometimes coach parents is either I imagine or I wonder, because that way it sort of leaves the door open for the child to say, like, no, I'm not feeling that way at all. But still gives you an opportunity to try to connect and label how they're feeling. So we're moving on. Yes, I'm going to be feeling left out. Everyone's going to be talking about it tomorrow. And the parent might say, you know, it's so hard to feel like you're missing out on something. But in our family, we do not have sleepovers on school nights. And, you know, I feel pretty hurt by you saying that you hate us. So notice that we're doing the thought empathy, but also sort of sticking to our guns and saying, you know, the rule is the rule. And in our perfect world, this child is quick to apologize. I'm so sorry. I was just angry. And the parent hopefully is quick to accept that apology. I know, and you're allowed to be angry. So again, sort of reminding them you're allowed to be angry, but it's not okay to say hurtful things. So it might be an opportunity to also remind the child of some behavioral expectations. And now if you're wondering if this would go this way in real life, right? This was a fairly smooth exchange. I would say you're probably right. I would guess that it would take a bit longer for this to get all hashed out. But I think the sort of point is that if parents do use some of these techniques, you're much more likely to de-escalate and to come to a place where you can sort of have a calmer evening than if you get into that power struggle right away.
Thanks for those awesome examples. And I think it really brings to life some of the things I was talking about in the 5 secrets, and can hopefully give everyone a sense of how you can start to use this and what conversations would seem like. So now I'm gonna move on to some tips and tricks and just things to think about as you bring these new tools into your toolbox of parenting and into the toolbox of what you can teach the parents that you work with. So first and foremost, I think this is the most important. Parenting is hard. And this isn't like, do the 5 secrets or you suck as a parent, or do the 5 secrets all the time or none of the time. You don't have to be perfect. If you're working with a parent that's willing to even try some of these things out, you're going to be so far ahead of where you were before. So even as a parent, I don't do this perfectly all the time. And really connecting with parents and letting them see that they don't need to do this perfectly, but that they can either do it some of the time. That would be awesome. I mean, obviously all the time would be amazing, but that would be in a perfect world, right? So really focusing even on situations where children are feeling the most negative emotions. That's when they're really screaming for us to know how they're feeling, or when their behavior is most out of control, right? Sort of trying to jump into the mindset that when children are most out of control, it's that they're craving for that connection and to help feel understood, not that they're bad kids or acting out, right? But they really want us to know. So acknowledging to parents, they don't have to do this all the time. They don't need to be perfect. Just getting it to be something that they're willing to try on. The next tip is to try to avoid why questions. Why questions are really overwhelming, right? I know we could probably all relate to this. When you're feeling really overwhelmed or really feeling angry, if someone says to you, why are you feeling that way? It's so dismissive. And also it adds to the burden that they're feeling in that moment. When children are out of control, if they knew why they were acting that way in a very rational way, they likely wouldn't be doing it, right? If there's a good reason that they're doing it, they're likely not doing it. So when your child's really angry and goes and shoves their brother, and then parents say, why did you do that? Or a new baby comes home, right? That's a really common one that I see with like the 3 to 7-year-old older sibling. Like, why do you keep touching your brother, right? If they knew, they wouldn't be doing it, right? So asking questions like, what was going on for you that made you want to do that, or what were you thinking or feeling, is a great alternative to why. And again, as I talked about earlier, that like catch and revise rule, I all the time sometimes say like, why did you do it? And like, what was going on for you, right? So you can catch yourself doing a why and then revise it. And I'd love to encourage you guys, even if you're not making this change, just observe now, right? Like how often we use why questions. The next tip is about matching the intensity of a child's emotion. Emotions can be really scary when kids feel really big ones and kind of overwhelming as a parent. And I think we try to dampen those emotions, but that takes away from what they're feeling. So really, as we're reacting, if we can match the intonation, the volume, the intensity of their emotions, it really conveys that we get it. Right? That doesn't mean like get into a screaming battle with them of like, I hate you, you're the worst, you're not listening, right? But really, if we could kind of connect in a more intense way. So if a kid is saying, I don't want to do it, I hate it. If you come in and say, I hear you, you don't want to do it, you're kind of missing the memo. But if you come in and saying like, this is really hard and you don't want to do it right now, you're kind of getting it with them and you're getting on their level. Similarly, the next tip is to pay attention to body language, kind of what they're conveying in their body and also where they're conveying it, right? So if a 3, 4, 5, 6, even 10-year-old is on the floor tantruming and you're standing up really tall, talking to them, talking down to them, you're not getting on their level with them. So either like crouching down, even like laying on the floor sometimes with a kid. If a kid is really sad and upset, kind of getting down there right next to them is really important. Right? So they can convey a lot by where they are and how they're communicating, and by getting there with them, you really convey like, I want to hear what you're going through and connect with you, rather than being like an overwhelming, dominating figure above them. One of my favorites, when all else fails, take a break. If you're not going to do a great job and you feel yourself getting overwhelmed, parenting is hard. Time yourself out and take a break. You could say something like, I notice I'm feeling a bit upset right now. I'm going to go take a break and come back when I'm calmer. And this conveys a few different things for children, why I think a parent timeout is so effective. Is one, it communicates that parents are aware of their feelings and that parents can feel upset too. And also that there's a solution, right? They can take a break, and if they want to come back when they're more regulated. It also takes away from blaming the child. Right? Instead of staying in that battle and saying, you're making me feel so frustrated, you kind of acknowledge what's going on for you. And this sort of mirrors what we want children to do too, right? We want children to become aware of what's going on for them. We want to mirror that. It's okay to take a break. Maybe you want a child to go into their room and time themselves out, right? Not in like a punitive way, but in a, I am feeling really big emotions or intense, or I'm feeling overwhelmed or angry. And I can go and take a break. I could go punch my fist into a pillow. I could go take some deep breaths in my room, and I can come back and re-enter the situation in a more adaptive way. I know I spoke about this earlier, but I like to reiterate that acknowledging children's feelings, connecting with children emotionally, doesn't have to make us permissive parents. This can be language that we use to enforce rules also, and I really think make us more effective parents. Parents that children actually want to listen to, because they feel like, hey, my parents are getting it. So an example, it's really fun to throw your food on the floor and see the dog get it. If you want to feed the dog, you can give him a treat, right? So I think Annie said something similar to this with her daughter this morning. I have a dog. I use this with my toddler all the time. I also use it with my older children. Again, another example that really brings this to life of how we can use I feel statements to set a limit. Jacob Towery, again, gave us an awesome example. He always has such fun examples. Something he said to his 9-year-old son, no, you can't have ice cream tonight. And I can imagine you might be feeling disappointed or angry or upset about that. Those emotions would make a lot of sense. And I'd probably be having some of those too if I were in your shoes. How are you feeling about my decision? Right? So he's using feeling empathy, I feel statements to really bring to life that like I am setting a limit, but I love you and I care about you and I totally see your perspective and it's totally valid. The next is that talking and empathizing isn't always going to help. Children need to be in the right mindset to be able to hear what we're saying and connect. So if your child is really dysregulated, they might need a hug, some time to themselves to really calm down. And it might be that you need to help them get to that point. My friends at Feeling Good Institute in California, Erica and Alicia, who are both really awesome child therapists, have this neat fact that if their heart rate is over 120 beats per minute, no learning or problem solving will be effective, right? So if we notice that kids are getting really out of control, we need to help them calm down. And this goes back to the beginning of my talk where I say, I want to help you learn to work with your children, not against your children. So if your child is coming home from camp or school, really angry or overwhelmed about something, we need to connect with them first, maybe give them a hug, help them deep breathe. One of the things I like to do with my kids and coach parents to do with their children, take deep breaths. For younger kids to count to 5, for older kids counting to 20, really helping them get into that place where they can collect themselves and get back to a place where learning can happen, right? Because all of these tools and tricks are about learning. And lastly, stay effective as parents. If you start threatening things that you're not following through with, you lose your effectiveness and kids don't take you seriously, right? So avoid threats and things that you won't follow through. So I always hear, I'm never taking you back here again, or you're gonna leave the park now, or you'll lose your iPad for a long time, right? I'm sure many of you hear those things, right? Or I'm gonna throw the TV away right now. So if you're going to do those things, more power to you, then definitely you can use that as a threat. I know in my house, I'm definitely not going to throw the television away. I like to unwind sometimes, not that much, but unwind and watch some television. And I know the iPad is super important to my children in small doses, so that's not something I'm going to do. So try to avoid threats that you're not going to follow through with. We're going to pause now for some questions. Any questions that?
Yeah.
Cool.
So one that we have is, when denying a child something they want or directing them to do something, do you recommend explanations? Would this not send a message to them that they only have to obey in situations when they understand the reason?
So I'm not entirely sure I understood. The question is, when denying and then providing a rationale, feeling like it sends the message that they only need to listen when there's a rationale.
I think so, and I think my understanding is that they must understand the rationale in order to be able to obey it, right? So do you provide the rationale all the time, or if you do that, does that send the message that they only have to obey when they understand the reasons? Or are there times when they just have to obey because I said so?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. And I totally agree. If you're always getting into this pattern where you need to give a rationale for them to behave, that sends a terrible pattern, right? Because then you're always needing to have a rationale, right? And sometimes kids just need to listen, and that's totally fine, right? What we want to do here is, when we can provide a rationale or when we can connect with our children, provide it, right? And there's times where children need to just listen. And what I love about the 5 secrets and communicating with my children, with encouraging parents to communicate with their children in a way that emphasizes connection and emotion, it makes it more like you're a team and that you're working together. And I find that kids then behave better, right? And then kids are more willing to, when you say no, to accept that limit, right? Sometimes the iPad is going off because I say it's going off, right? And setting that limit. And so you definitely can deny children an experience without giving a rationale. But if you have one and you're willing to share it, that's great. I think with parenting, the more you can kind of change up routines and don't always have to do things the same way, the more resilient kids become.
Great. And then we had another one, and I think it sort of bears readdressing or sort of further explanation, because like I said before, I think this is one that comes up a lot. But the question is related to using an I feel statement when the issue isn't related to you, so you as the parent, And could that make the child feel like you're making it about you and that the child is responsible for your feelings, even when you are not the subject or target of the concern?
Mhm. Yeah, I love that question. And I also feel most effective in answering questions that are like specific, like if this was the situation. So if whoever asked that question wants to give a specific example, I can talk to that, but I could also speak sort of in generalities about, it sounds like there's a theme of, do I feel statements lead to children feeling burdened by parents' emotions? And what I always like to say of that is we can titrate the level of I feel statements to the situation. And also, I feel statements don't always need to be about negative feelings, right? So I feel so proud of you that you took that risk at camp today. Or I feel super proud that I know it's really hard for you to dunk your head, but you're doing it anyway. Or I know it wasn't easy for you to include Johnny in your play group, and I felt kind of excited to see you take that risk, right? So they don't always need to be like, oh, I'm feeling so sad and bad or tired. We can also use them in positive ways. I think when the more heavy emotions come in, I think those are the ones that people are maybe concerned that if you use them too much, children will start to feel guilty. I think it needs to be done in a teaching kind of way. Right? So kids start to recognize that what they're doing impacts others, but in an age appropriate way, right? Like when they punch you, saying, oh, I feel a bit hurt. I think that's realistic rather than guilty, and so we want to be careful with the intensity of the I feel statements. Annie, does that seem like it answers the question, or maybe you have anything else to add to that?
I think so. And I think you just sort of touched on what I was thinking about too, is sort of trying to avoid really strong emotions, I think, right? Like, so you're never going to say like, first of all, I would never recommend someone saying like, you are making me feel that way. And so saying like, you're making me feel so angry, right. I wouldn't do, right? But maybe like, I feel a little disappointed that happened would be sort of a softer way to still use an I feel statement without conveying that the child sort of is responsible for how you feel.
Yeah, and if you do need to use kind of a harsher or more challenging I feel statement, I always like to encourage like a sandwich, and you could sandwich that with stroking. Right? I'm feeling a bit disappointed right now that that's happening, and I still really love you, and I'm happy that we're talking about this, right? So it can also be sandwiched with something more positive to sort of titrate the intensity of that negative emotion. Any other questions that are popping up?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to think through if this is a great question. I just don't know if that we're going to have time for it. It's sort of a larger issue one. So how about we'll take this one. So this person's a therapist and saying, it's so great to acknowledge and affirm feelings, but how do we get children to understand and learn that not everyone is able to do that for them all of the time?
Mm-hmm. Right. So I guess the idea is if as therapists we're teaching the parents and there's sort of like a total success case, right? And the child now has the super emotionally attuned parent, and then maybe they go off to school or something like that, right? And the teachers aren't taking the time to do this. I don't view using these tools as a way that makes children need and crave this emotional connection, right? When they get it at home, a lot of times that gives them freedom to kind of go out and behave better in the world because they feel like they have a place to come home to and be emotionally connected. And so when kids feel understood and listened to, they behave better. But this doesn't set it up so that, they have to go talk to their friends about their emotions all the time and can only talk to people that are connecting with them. It gives them a really solid home base and foundation to kind of use this language. I don't want to talk too much about my kids, but something really resonates with this. Something happened at camp with one of my child that he was really upset about something. And he went to his counselor and said, I really wanted to hit this kid because he was making me feel really angry. Right. And the counselor texted me and let me know, but she didn't get into like a lovey mush fest with him, but it gave him the tools to, when that happens out of the home or somewhere else, to really be able to communicate in that way. I'm happy to answer any other questions via email. Annie and I'll move forward to the communication slide and then go back to the teaching. We'd love to answer any other questions or hear any feedback from you. Feel free, if we didn't get to answer your question, to email either me at taylor@feelinggoodinstitute.com or Annie at annym@feelinggoodinstitute.com. And I'll go back to this slide. If anything we said seemed exciting to you, or you feel excited to learn more about doing really effective therapy with children and adolescents. Adolescents I didn't cover here, but do cover children and adolescents in my 12-week live online group, where I do about an hour of didactics, then we do case presentation, and we also do small group work. So you'll have an opportunity in a very small, intimate setting to practice the tools and techniques that I teach you. And we also have a few awesome small group leaders. So we'll meet in both large groups online, and then you'll have a small practice group where you'll give and get feedback on those skills. And then a bit more of an intimate setting would be my monthly online case consultation group, where we'll both practice these skills monthly and also get some case consultation on your most challenging child and adolescent CBT cases. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Maybe before we end, Taylor,
Yeah.
just remind people about the CE parts of those who attend live and stayed for the whole time are eligible to get one CE hour for this webinar. And in order to do so, we will send to you in a few days a survey. We're calling it the CE survey for you to fill out. Once you fill that out, you will automatically get that CE certificate into your inbox. If you don't receive the CE certificate into your inbox, look in your spam folder. If you participated in the webinar today but don't get an email saying that you're eligible for CE for it in a few days, then please email either Taylor or actually preferably our admin at feelinggoodinstitute.com and let her know that you participated in the webinar today, but somehow the system didn't register you fully and you asked to get the CE survey as well. That's all I have for you as well. Thank you so much, Taylor and Annie. I think you did a beautiful job. It was a real pleasure for me. And as maybe some of you or most of you know, today's webinar was done kind of as a way to support people who tried to get into our webinar a couple of days ago and were not successful because of some tech difficulties that we had. So I want to apologize for that again. Thank you for your flexibility, and very sorry for wasting your time if your time was wasted a couple of days ago trying to get in. But hope that you still got in today and got to enjoy it.
Have a great day,
Thank you all. And now,
Bye.
bye-bye.